Good afternoon. My name is Joe Bandel. I'm the last Rosicrucian. Today, I'm going to do something I'm going to talk about something that's basically uh, talking about distortions of the law of one. Now, the law of one among the New Age people has been widely publicized. This is the actual uh, first edition. But actually, if you look at, there's four editions or four uh, issues of the channelings of the Law of One. And what's happened is, in my opinion, there's been some severe distortions about the Law of One, in which your average New Ager is coming along spouting things, uh, and they're misrepresenting the material, which I think is kind of serious, because if you're going to base everything on the Law of One, you ought to do it objectively and honestly. But before I get into that, I'll kind of describe uh, my. I picked these up when they first came out, and I eagerly awaited the next copy. Um, this was years and years ago. Let me see when it first came out. 1981 is when it first came out. So that was a long time ago. And I'm going to, as you may or may not remember or know, my own, what I call organic Gnosticism, it's the path that I follow, is based upon, among other things, is based upon the physics of Dewey Larson. And it was in this book, The Law of One, that they first mentioned Dewey Larson. So even the roots of what I believe and go by have its roots, its basis in this material, which is kind of interesting. And let me see if I can. I'll just read a thing about the physics of Dewey Larson. The questioner: is the physics of Dewey Larson correct? Ra, I am Ra. The channel always answers that way. The physics of sound vibrational complex Dewey is a correct system as far as it is able to go. There are those things which are not included in this system. However, those coming after this particular entity, using the basic concepts of vibration and the study of vibrational distortions, will begin to understand that which you know of as gravity and those things you consider as n dimensions. These things are necessary to be included in a more universal, shall we say, physical theory. So, anyway, I'm just sharing that because my own understanding is based upon the physics of Dewey Larson. It's based upon the science of chaos theory. It's based upon like the Horn Torus and the cutting edge, the most recent scientific papers that are coming out that are dealing with solar forcing of climate and weather events, and also uh, cosmic forcing or galactic forcing of events within our galaxy with the galactic current sheet, things like that. In other words, modern science is looking at pretty much everything that exists as being electromagnetic in nature. And that ties in and is agreeable with Dewey Larson's system. So I just thought I would share that. But one of the things that is being distorted is this concept of service to self and service to others, because the law of one material basically says people fall into entities basically fall into two categories, uh, service to self or service to others. And what's popular, what's politically correct, is to say the service to self ones are the evil ones and the service to others are the good ones. And that is not at all what these books talk about. So it's doing a real disservice to this material, quoting it that way. I'm going to try to say, in my understanding, the position that this channel material takes. Basically, it does not pass judgment upon one path or the other. In fact, it considers both of them as necessary and needed. And before I get into that, I'm going to give an example of from where I think they're coming from, but I'm trying to put it in my own words. Anything that we are aware of, the process of becoming aware, the process of being conscious of something, is the ability to pick it out from a background. If you cannot pick it out from a background, you're not aware of it. So there has to be a background. And the background, for all intents and purposes, is the opposite polarity. So you need to have a background. And so that's what we're talking about. The basic duality is you have a foreground and a background, and they're needed for awareness. And that does not make what's in the foreground good or evil, and it doesn't make what's in the background good or evil. It just means we're only able to comprehend half. We're able to comprehend something in the foreground, or with a few mental tricks like these images that you look at, maybe you can perceive the background, or maybe you can perceive by switching the way you perceive. Maybe you can kind of swap. Here I see these figures, this way I see something else. Okay? And that relates in a way to the yin yang symbol, which shows two perfectly matched symbols that are spiraling around each other. And as they spiral around each other, they create stability. That is the concept of unity that you should be thinking of. Because this concept of this awareness of what's in the foreground and the background, well, the background is not necessarily a mirror image of what's in the foreground. And the more distorted something is in the foreground, the more distorted the background's going to be, to where they're not really recognizable as having anything to do with each other. Whereas the yin-yang symbol, obviously, by being like a mirror image, it lends itself to being recognized the way it is. So anyway, what in the law of one, what they talk about is service to self, which means very intent upon your own soul growth. Now, anybody who's following a individualistic path, well, let me rephrase this. From another viewpoint, from another perspective, it's also said that for the soul to develop properly, it needs to be perfectly balanced between the male and the female sides. But we find ourselves within a physical body that is either male or female. And somehow we need to balance, we need to get the added balance by our interactions. We need to get the opposite sex energy from other people. That because our own body, our own genetic structure is not creating it. So we get it by exchanging with other people. Again, there's nothing good or evil about that particular process. In fact, it's a wholesome process. It's healthy. And I was just looking before I started this video or whatever, I was looking and they were saying that in one place, I don't think I can find it right now, but that you need both service to others and service to self entities because you need the catalyst. That's the way it is formed in this. You need the catalyst for soul development and soul growth. You need the catalyst for, if you didn't have the catalyst, everything would be the same and there'd be no growth. So you need a catalyst. And if you think about the definition of catalyst, a catalyst is something that triggers or causes or supports action or a reaction or activity, but then when all is said and done, it's not a part of it. In other words, it removes itself. So catalyst causes soul growth, but it doesn't necessarily stay with us. It's kind of like we read a book or we look for a concept, we listen, we learn something, where we get information from somebody else and we think about it and we come up with our own conclusion and we kind of lay that original material aside in favor of our own conclusion, in favor of what is true to us, as opposed to simply being a copycat of that material. So if you think about what's going on in this world, you can kind of see where there's some problems because there's a lot of copycat stuff like echo chambers where people are simply copying the message, being politically correct, without being able to put it in their own words, without having their own understanding of it. And this is a distortion. In fact, everything that's channeled here, they call their own channeling distortions. Why do they call them distortions? Because even Crowley had something to say about this. He said, when you try to share the truth with somebody else, or what is the truth to you, when you try to share that exactly truthfully and exactly and perfectly with anyone else, they're not going to understand it the way that you intend. They may, if you're lucky, they may be able to intuit what you're getting at, and then come to the realization that you were intended. But to actually understand it from what you shared, they're going to mess it up one way or another. They can mess it up in a big way, they can mess it up in a minor way. It cannot be directly expressed because it's coming from you going to somebody who's not you. That's a distortion. And that's recognized. The channels in the law of one, they recognize these distortions. And they talk about them, and they say that they express it in that way. So it makes it kind of intriguing and very interesting material, and that they recognize that they can't express it perfectly and we can't understand it perfectly, but we're giving it a shot anyway, that kind of thing. And they say that we need catalyst. We need the catalyst of the opposite polarity. So the males need the catalyst of the females need the catalyst of the male perspective. The people that are traveling on a mystical path need the catalyst of those people that are traveling on an occult path. People on the occult path need the same thing. They need the catalyst of the people on the spiritual path, because each entity, each soul needs to complete itself. It needs to travel both. It needs to be balanced in both. And the great error, if you will, what they're getting wrong here is all these politically correct New Agers, they're not sharing the importance of the service to self position. All they're doing is service to others, service to others, service to others, and we'll get rid of these other people. Not realizing they need to find in themselves both. They need to balance in themselves both service to self and service to others. And ultimately, something that is not being said in the mainstream or in the politically correct New Age people is that at the highest level, there is, according to the law of one channelers, at the highest level, there's no difference. Or effectively, there's no difference, because ultimately, the service to others person is going to need to learn tough love. If they truly want to help others, if they truly want to be of service to others, they're going to need to learn a form of tough love. And in so doing, it's going to cause others to be more disciplined, to be more precise, to be more thoughtful. And in the process, they are going to learn more about themselves as well. At the same token, they're saying at the highest levels, service to self people are going to learn that the most effective way of getting what you want is to be honest and fair and truthful with others. Now, what happens is at the lower levels, the service to self people, they don't understand the value of self discipline. They don't understand the value of tough love, and they find it hard. And at the lower levels, on the other side, the service to self people, entities, they don't understand the importance of being honest with others, being fair. And they just going to try to run over them. Now, here's another thing that we hear about a lot. We hear that the elite, okay, what are the elite trying to do? They're trying to enslave humanity. And I'm not arguing with that. I believe that there is that's possible that there are people that are trying to do that and that it's wrong. However, I wrote 3 essays on duality. There was duality of the male, duality of the female, and then duality sexual alchemy. And in those 3 essays, I described, as I understood it, the path of the male soul. And I described the path of the female soul. And each step, each stage in both of those was recognizable. In other words, I had memories that could relate to each side. And it's important to cultivate those, because in relationships, what happens is you're at one stage and you exchange experiences, you exchange energy with somebody else of the opposite sex, and you gradually gain the ability to get that insight, to get that experience. That is the process of that sexual alchemy or tantra stage. And that's healthy, that's normal. But what we see in our world is twisted. We think, well, let me put it this way. Ultimately, in the path of the male soul and entity, the highest point is to serve. And I'm going to say that I serve the goddess. I serve the feminine principle. I serve Gaia. I serve. And that's what I live for. And that's what I'm proud to do. But there's a big difference between I serve and I obey. In other words, I'm not enslaved. I'm doing this out of my own purpose, out of my own direction. Can you see the distinction? Can you see the difference? Can you experience the difference between volunteering and being told that this is what you're going to do? Being enslaved into something. Because that's what this world is trying to do. They're trying to force people into doing things that they don't want to do. And you're never going to find a good, that's not right. I want to serve with my whole body, soul, mind, and spirit. And so that's what I try to do. but I will resist anybody ordering me around because that's not what I want to do. I have a real problem with authority figures, okay? And that is an example of where things are distorted. Now, this is as far as I'm going to take it. I'm going to try to maybe come up with a few different videos dealing with some of these things as they come to mind. But this one on the law of one, I was thinking, the politically correct answer to these things is not right. There's a lot wrong here. On one last thing I just thought of, they're talking about third density, fourth density, fifth density, sixth density. Politically correct uh, terms, right? And they're saying Gaia, Earth, is ascending, and you have this one, humanity is ascending too, or they have the opportunity to ascend, and they're going from third density into fifth density, skipping over fourth density. Fourth, okay, and you know what the law of one people talk about that? They say only the service to self skip from third to fifth. They skip the fourth density because they don't think it's important. But the service to others, it is important, and that is because the fourth density is the heart. The fourth density is the upper emotions. Now, if you think about Gaia's ascension, you're thinking about humanity's ascension. Fifth density is mental. It's mental energies. And what they're doing is saying you're dumping the emotions and you're going into fifth density. And in other words, you're in your head. You're living in your head. You're living in your head. You're losing that organic connection to other life. And Gaia's ascension is going to fourth density. It's going from third to fourth. Gaia's ascension is keeping that organic life force connection. And as Gaia ascends, she's bringing all of life with her. And all these people that are trying to go to fifth density are trying to leave. They're trying to sever that connection. So I'm just leaving that as a thought because I consider these things distortions. And they're saying, in my mind, they're saying this is what the law of one is all about. And the law of one, if they want to talk about that, is, I understand it as something totally different. Anyway, till next time, I hope that gives you some catalyst, something to think about. Thank you.